Good morning, dear students. Today we shall begin with the fourth part of the chapter Demand. In the previous class, we had studied about determinants of demand. There were two types of determinants. One was for individual demand and the other was for market demand. So the topic for today is law of demand. Law of demand states that other things remaining constant, there is an inverse relationship between quantity demanded and own price of the commodity. So this law, naming law of demand, states that there is an inverse relationship, opposite relationship between quantity demanded and own price of the commodity, which means that when price increases, quantity demanded decreases, and when price decreases, quantity demanded increases. That is about inverse relationship, opposite relationship. And over here, under this law, they are considering certain things to be constant. These things are nothing but the other determinants apart from own price of the commodity that we had studied about. Okay, and now I have underlined this entire law because this law is one of the most important laws that you are going to study in this year. So always remember law of demand. You need to learn this law. So there are a schedule and there is a graph which is going to explain further why this law of demand has come into effect. So over here under this schedule, they are showing that when price is 10, quantity demanded is 100. When price reduces to rupees 9, quantity demanded increases and reaches to 150 units. When price decreases further to 8 rupees, then the quantity demanded is 200 units. So over here there is an inverse relationship that is visible over here. Price decreases and hence quantity demanded increases. If the price would have increased, then quantity demanded would have reduced. To your right, there is this graph which is not precisely showing this figure that has been mentioned in demand schedule. This graph is general in nature, which is using alphabets to show this law of demand. It is using P, P1, Q and Q1. So over here we can see then when price is OP, then quantity demanded is OQ. When price reduces to OP1, quantity demanded increases to OQ1. And D of course denotes the demand curve, which is downward sloping from left to right. So over here there is this description. In the following graph, x-axis denotes quantity and y-axis denotes price. D denotes demand. Demand curve D shows that demand for commodity X extends from OQ to OQ1. The downward slope of demand curve is an expression of law of demand. So this downward sloping demand curve shows that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. This is what law of demand states. So there are few assumptions of the law of demand. Law of demand holds good when other things remain constant. The other things that remain constant are as follows. So when we studied law of demand, it was mentioned, this phrase was mentioned, other things remaining constant. So those other things I told you that those are the other determinants apart from own price of commodity. So all those determinants are mentioned over here as assumptions. So the first one is taste and preferences of the consumer remain constant. Second is there is no change in the income of the buyer. Third is price of related goods do not change. And the last one is consumers do not expect any significant change in the availability of the commodity in the near future. So we have seen that all the other determinants remain constant under the assumptions of law of demand. Now there is this question, why does demand curve slope downward? So we just now saw that law of demand states that there is an inverse relationship between quantity demanded and price, and the downward sloping shows that inverse relationship. But there are few other reasons as well that are included over here. So let us study about it. The first one is law of diminishing marginal utility. According to this law, as consumption of a commodity increases, marginal utility of each successive unit goes on diminishing. Accordingly, for every additional unit to be purchased, the consumer is willing to pay less and less price. So you have already studied about law of diminishing marginal utility, and under that law we saw that as the consumer consumes more and more units of a particular commodity, the utility derived from each successive unit goes on diminishing, it decreases. And as a result, since the utility is decreasing, the consumer wants to pay lesser amount of money for each successive unit. And as a result, when price decreases, quantity demanded increases. The second point is income effect. Income effect refers to the effect on quantity demanded when real income of the buyer changes owing to change in the price of the commodity. With the fall in price, real income increases. Now this term real income means the purchasing power of an individual. So whenever there is a change in price of a commodity, there is also a change in purchasing power of an individual. If there is a fall in price of a commodity, the consumer will be able to purchase more amount of commodity with the same amount of money that he used to invest for that particular commodity. So that is income effect. The third point is substitution effect. Substitution effect refers to substitution of one commodity for the other when it becomes relatively cheaper. For example, when price of commodity X falls, it becomes cheaper in relation to commodity Y. Accordingly, X is substituted for Y. It is the expansion of demand for commodity X due to substitution effect. So we have already studied about substitute goods. Under that, we studied that one good can be used in place of another. So over here they are saying that if price of a particular commodity falls, suppose that commodity is commodity X. So if the price of a particular commodity X falls, then that commodity can be used for substituting a similar product which is mentioned over here as Y. So as soon as the price of commodity X falls, the demand for that commodity is going to rise. so that people are able to substitute their requirement of commodity Y with commodity X. That is substitution effect. The next point is size of consumer group. When the price of a commodity falls, many more buyers can afford it. As a result, demand for the commodity expands. So, whenever there is a fall in the price of a commodity, more and more number of people are going to be able to afford that particular product. And as a result, the demand for that particular commodity is going to increase. The next point is different uses. A good may have several uses. Milk, for example, is used for making curd, cheese, butter, etc. If price of milk reduces, it will be put to different uses. As a result, demand for milk expands. So whenever the price of milk or any other product which can be used in several manner, whenever the price of such product rises, people try to limit their use of that commodity. But when the price of that same product falls, people start consuming more and more of that commodity by using that commodity in different manner. Over here they have said that milk can be used in different manner. It can be used to make curd, cheese, your tea, coffee. There are various things. So as the price falls, the demand for milk will expand. So these are the various reasons why demand curve slopes downwards and show inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Now there are few exceptions to the law of demand. Exceptions are those cases when law of demand is not followed, when there is an increase in demand with increase in price. So let us see. There are some commodities whose demand expands when their price rises and contracts when their price falls. In this situation, the demand curve slopes upward from left to right. Following are some exceptions to the law of demand. So there are few exceptions that have been mentioned. Let us go through it and then we will see how demand curve for exceptions are made. So the first one is article of distinction. According to Professor Veblen, there are certain goods which are articles of social distinction. These articles are demanded only because of their prices are high. If their price falls, they will no longer be considered as articles of distinction and their demand will shrink. Thus, these goods defy the law of demand. Precious diamonds and vintage car are few examples. So there are few goods that are considered as articles of distinction. Distinction word has come from distinct, unique. Okay, so these articles help an individual to stand out in crowd, to be identified as a different, as a very luxurious person. So these goods are demanded only and only when the price is high, and as soon as when price falls, there will be a fall in demand of such commodities, because it will no longer be article of distinction. Many people will be able to afford it. Okay, so that is why its demand will shrink. It will no longer be article of distinction. So few examples of such articles of distinction are precious diamonds, vintage cars, and even the paintings, the precious vintage paintings that are available. So all these goods are articles of distinction, and consumers are willing to pay more and more price for these products. Second exception is Giffen goods. Giffen goods are highly inferior goods, showing a very negative effect, income effect, and as a result, when price of such commodities falls, their demand also falls, even when they happen to be relatively cheaper than other goods. This is popularly known as Giffen Paradox. Paradox means something that is contradicting. So Giffen goods were highly inferior goods, and the individual who identified this particular trend, this paradox, his name was Sir Robert Giffen, and he observed that in early 19th century, when the price of bread increased, people used to cut down their expense on meat, and they used to intake more of bread. So this showed that there is this contradiction. This trend is not following the law of demand. When there is an increase in price of bread, there is increase in demand for bread. Okay, and vice versa, when there will be a fall in price of a particular commodity, there will be fall in their demand. So this was about Giffen goods. The next exception is irrational judgment. Law of demand fails when consumers judge the quality of a commodity by its price. It is an irrational judgment. Perhaps it is owing to the huge price difference between organic and non-organic products in the market that the rich section of the society considered organic products of very high quality. Accordingly, quantity demanded of these products tend to rise even when their prices are extremely high. So there are few individuals in our economy who judge the quality of a commodity by its price. They consider that the product which is having higher price is going to be of better quality. And as a result, there are few individuals who prefer to purchase organic products rather than the non-organic products, even though the difference is negligible in quality, but the price is what makes them stand out. And as a result, these rich individuals, they prefer to purchase organic products. The next exception is ignorance. Sometimes out of ignorance, a consumer buys more of a commodity when its price has gone up and may buy less even if its price has in fact gone down. So many a time a consumer becomes ignorant whenever they want to purchase a particular commodity. Whenever they want to consume a particular commodity, they will buy it even if it means that purchasing it at a higher price. So that is about ignorance. This next exception is goods expected to become costly. If prices are expected to rise in future, then people may buy more even if the present prices are high. Similarly, if prices are expected to fall, people may not demand even if the current prices are low. So, speculation is the word that can be used over here. If the consumer speculates, if they consider that a particular commodity is going to become more expensive in future, they will purchase that commodity in present even if the prices are higher than usual. And if an individual considers that there will be a fall in price in near future, they will not consume that product in present even if the price of that commodity is lesser than usual. The next is necessities. Law of demand is not applicable in case of basic necessities, for example, medicines, textbooks, salt, cooking gas, etc. Minimum quantities of these goods have to be consumed even if the prices are high. So, law of demand is not applicable on essential goods. Essential goods are those goods that are essential for an individual to lead a normal life. Even if the price of these essential goods are high, an individual needs to consume them even if it means cutting down their other expenses. Okay, medicines are one such essentials. If an individual has to consume a particular medicine in order to remain healthy, he or she will cut down their other expenses in order to afford these medicines at even at a higher price. So necessities is one such category of goods where law of demand is not applicable. The last one is other exceptions. Change in season and climatic conditions, change in fashion trends, emergencies like famine, drought, or curfew, etc., are some of the exceptions where the law of demand may not hold true, where the consumer will demand more even at higher prices. Now this is the last topic. Demand curve slopes upward when law of demand fails. So over here there is this graph which shows that the demand curve is moving upwards from left to right, on the contrary to what we saw earlier. Earlier we saw just the opposite. The demand curve was sloping downwards from left to right, but over here there is an upward slope. We can see that when price was P1, then the quantity demanded was Q1, and when price increased to P2, the quantity demanded increased to Q2. So over here there is this description which says that x-axis denotes quantity and y-axis denotes price. When price increases from OP1 to OP2, demand extends from OQ1 to OQ2 and vice versa. Therefore, there is a positive relationship between demand and price of commodity in case of Giffen goods, or when goods are demanded simply because of their high price, or when consumers judge the quality of a commodity by its price, etc. So in this graph we can see that there is a positive relationship between price and quantity demanded. Whenever price increases, quantity demanded also increases. So today we have learnt about, first of all, law of demand. Secondly, assumptions of the law of demand. The third thing that we studied about was why does demand curve slope downward. Next we studied about exceptions to the law of demand. And the last topic was demand curve slopes upward when law of demand fails. So that is it. These are the assignment questions. How is the demand for a good affected by a rise in the price of other goods? Explain. Second question is, explain the law of demand with the help of a diagram. State its exceptions. The last question is, why is there an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded of a commodity? So that is it for today's class. Thank you.